we've got just about everybody we're going to get, so it might be a few late stragglers, but welcome everybody to the first meeting of the Baseball Landmarks Committee. My name is Jacob Pomeranke, for those who don't know. I'm going to turn this over to John Racanelli, who's the chair of the committee, and he will talk a little bit about the project itself, as far as, highlighting a lot of different baseball related attractions around North America. And then at the end, we'll have more of kind of a free-flowing discussion, maybe some brainstorming sessions on how best to make this committee go full steam ahead. So John, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Jacob. I appreciate it. This is going to be a lot of fun. If you don't know me, I'm John Racanelli. I'm with the Chicago chapter. And I think probably like a lot of you who are on the call tonight, like to combine your love of baseball history with taking road trips, baseball trips. And if you're like me, if work has me in East St. Louis, or a friend is getting married in New Orleans, or I'm dropping my son off at school in Cleveland, I am looking for baseball sites. I need to see baseball stuff. So I basically didn't find a good place, a good centralized place to get all this information. And probably 5-6 years ago, I just started making a list of my own. So that's kind of how we got to this place. I realized in talking with a lot of my friends here in the SABR Chicago chapter that there's actually a lot of us that like to go. We'll drive an hour out of our way to see old ballpark, or half hour out of the way to see a historical marker. So with the help of SABR and co-chair Chris Kamka, who can't be here tonight, he's got to work, and vice chair Mark Armour, I'm absolutely thrilled to announce the formation of the Baseball Landmarks Research Committee, and just have a little bit of a PowerPoint to hopefully kind of go through what the goals are, what kind of sites we're looking to do, what phase one of the project's going to be. And then if you have at any point questions along the way, if you want to just use the chat feature, we'll try and answer them as best we can throughout the course of the program. And then at the end, hopefully there'll be some time we could, like Jacob said, open it up for some discussion and questions and so forth. So I've got a PowerPoint, and I'm hoping I'm able to share this with everybody, and everybody can see it. Okay, does that look good? Can you see the title page?
Looks good, John.
Okay, perfect. So basically the committee, everybody, I've heard from, I don't know, 20, 25 people at this point already that seem to be excited and willing to help. So I am pretty excited to get this launched and answer some questions that everybody kind of had along the way. So the committee, how does it work? Basically, what we're wanting to do is come up with the most complete database of baseball related sites, attractions across North America and beyond. I've heard from a couple of people in Canada. Yes, obviously we want Canada. If we could have Mexico and Puerto Rico and Japan and wherever else there may be baseball sites eventually, I would certainly love for this to be a worldwide, globe-wide kind of thing. To the left there, or to the right there, you'll see what is the hopeful event in the future will be to put together some kind of map. What you're seeing there is just basically a prototype or an artist rendering. And for instance, this shows portions of Alabama. In Birmingham, if anybody here has been to Rickwood Field, I highly recommend it. It has got to be on your bucket list. But it'll just have a little information, a picture, maybe some information about the site, what exactly is there. And at the bottom of whatever information we'll have will be the name of the person that verified it and a date that says last verified. With a project this size, obviously it's going to be difficult to have, minute by minute verification of everything. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we're giving people information on at least somebody was there within the last year, last 3 years, or last 5 years, or whatever, and it was still there last time they were there. Also, want to encourage SABR members to visit and verify, document these sites, kind of foster some collaboration between the local chapters to share and maybe even rank the must-see baseball sites for each region. Like I said, eventually we'd like to put this into an interactive map so that baseball fans can reference it while traveling and can discover some nearby sites maybe around where you live that you didn't even know were there. And also another feature will be to record and document different things, especially statues, museums that may go out of business, or a marker that may end up missing or damaged, so that we have it for future reference. The landmarks are going to be basically put into these categories. Most active ballparks will be pretty easy to do in terms of getting them on the list, but keeping those current is going to be a little bit more of a challenge because of naming rights changes and teams changing locations and building new ballparks and so forth. So that'll be one of the things, but at least from my perspective on my baseball trips, what I'm looking to do first and foremost in the summertime is find some new ballparks to go to. So active ballparks is top of the list. Then historic ballparks, historical markers and statues that have been erected, murals and public art, other museums, exhibits, walk of fame, wall of fame, that kind of thing, grave sites, historic homes, baseball movie filming locations, and then other attractions and photo opportunities. Like, for instance, I think in Connecticut is the wiffle ball factory. So if I was nearby, I might want to go get a picture in front of the sign, or maybe it'd be some other restaurant or something that has a pretty extensive memorabilia collection, things like that. In terms of identifying the sites, like I said, active, major league, minor league, independent, and some summer wood bat college leagues. Maybe the NCAA in the future. At this point, I had not put into my list any of the college ballparks. Obviously, there's going to be an awful lot of them. So if you start off, and I don't know if you want to limit it to just Division I or Division II, but when you get into Division III, you're going to have an awful lot there too. But also statues, both of players and coaches, broadcasters, owners. One of the things, like for instance, my home ballparks here in Chicago, Wrigley Field and Comiskey, both have statues around the ballpark, other kinds of photo opportunities and historic markers and so forth. So for a fan traveling to Wrigley Field or Comiskey from out of town, it would be nice to have information on where exactly those things are located around the ballpark. Historic markers, museums, both full-time museums, museums that may not be just baseball related, or maybe a sports museum that has a significant baseball collection, those kinds of things. Grave sites with the GPS coordinates that show right to the area of the headstone, any walk of fame or wall of fame. And then, like I said, movie filming locations that have a distinctive and recognizable locale. What we're not necessarily looking for right now are what I kind of describe as questionable sites. Those are locations that just have no remaining physical structure or marker. If anybody here has perused green cathedrals, you're going to find all kinds of locations of former ballparks where there's just nothing there. It's either an empty field or a warehouse or something. So at this point, although we will certainly consider those on a case-by-case basis, unless there's some remaining structure or some kind of marker there, we're not necessarily looking to add those right now. There's also a number of ballparks or just parks that are named after ball players that have no additional connection to the location. A place I used to work, I would pass by a park called Babe Ruth Park that was in Bellwood, Illinois, and had absolutely no connection to Babe Ruth whatsoever. I'm not thinking that we want to add those. Other ball fields that are named after individuals, and there's really no plaque or statue dedicated there. And other sites, I used George Halas as an example. You may know that George Halas played a handful of games for the Yankees in 1919. There's a statue of him outside Soldier Field here in Chicago, but he's really more associated with the Bears, and it's really not a baseball statue. And I put restaurants on here. Restaurants close and move, and we're not trying to make this into some kind of travel recommendation guide like Yelp or TripAdvisor. It's really more for noting baseball history and ballparks and those kinds of things. So for ballparks, like I said, we're looking for Major League Baseball, affiliated minor league baseball, independent leagues, and college wood-bat leagues. Pretty much anything that you're going to want to maybe take in a ball game at on your summer road trips, whether it's a baseball concentrated one or you happen to be going somewhere and you're thinking, oh man, I might be able to catch a game. For the ballpark information, we're not trying to replicate what the Ballparks Committee is doing or what anybody else might be doing in terms of a full-on history of any ballpark. But really all we wanted to do is just note the name, any previous names, the names of the teams that play there in the league, a general seating capacity, year opened. And then, like I mentioned, the precise locations of statuary, if there's an in-park museum or Hall of Fame, if there's specific memorabilia displays or markers, what the retired numbers might be, the walls of fame and so forth. I don't know what you guys have looked at, but I really don't think that the major league teams do a real good job at noting these things in their websites or otherwise. And so I've over the years have found that it's easier just to kind of try and find the information on my own. And then also if they offer tours, a lot of ballparks at the major league level will offer tours. So it's really not necessarily any more information about it than our tours offered, yes or no. Historic ballpark information. These are the ones that are still standing, but not necessarily still in use for baseball. They could be. Maybe they've been turned over to an amateur league or a high school plays there, whatever. But this is everything. Former major league, minor league, AAGPBL, Negro League ballparks, and so forth. The photograph here is actually, it's Horlick Field in Racine, Wisconsin. One of those plaques there commemorates the Racine Bells who played there. But the field right now is no longer used for baseball. It's a football field. But these are the kinds of things that I like to go see when I'm in Racine. So that's why we would have things like this on the list. Basically just listing the name of the teams that played there, the leagues, again, the seating capacity, the years in operation, and any remaining structure information, or if there's a historical plaque or marker that's posted there. I've got miscellaneous ballparks on here. These might be ones that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, ballpark with some kind of noteworthy significance. If anybody recognizes the ballpark pictured here, that's actually Thillins Field in Skokie, Illinois. And during a WGN broadcast in the 50s by famous broadcaster Jack Brickhouse, they decided to put a camera out in center field, and that, as far as I know, was the first known time that a broadcast put a camera on in center field. So if you're ever in Skokie and you want to go see where that happened, that's one of the things that I thought we could put on the list. And otherwise, just tourist attractions. And then basically the description would also include a narrative description of what the significance it is. For Thillins, I would put on their, birthplace basically of the center field baseball camera. Historical markers, pretty straightforward. You've all seen these, I expect, just posted to honor baseball related individuals or sites, ballparks, those kinds of things. On these kinds of, the information we'd be looking for here obviously is the subject, maybe a transcript of the text, a dedication date. Sometimes there are markers that are posted nearby, so we just want to make sure that anything that's nearby, either on the same location or within a few miles or something like that is posted. And with this, and we'll talk about with statues too, but accessibility, sometimes these are not necessarily accessible without being inside a ballpark, and maybe you need to be inside there during a game. Maybe there is a fence around it because there's construction going on at a park in Lakewood, Ohio, where my friend Bill and I tried to get to a Jimmy Fox marker that was there. So when one of the things too, like I said, was if these are missing or damaged, then we can report it. That at this point, We've got a photograph of it. We've got the text transcribed, but it's missing or damaged, and then we'll note that so that the next person that goes there is aware that it's not necessarily there. Maybe future marker placement we could keep on a separate list. People, locations, events that may warrant a future marker. I heard from a couple of people that had experience placing markers, and maybe this is something where we can lean on your expertise to help get markers placed. And that's likely going to fall into the categories of 1, fundraising, and 2, getting the permission of whatever governmental agencies or whoever the private landowner is to put those up. And basically, we'll keep a list of maybe sites that want to, or that we may want to in the future, figure if there will be a good reason to put up a marker there. Statues and sculptures, kind of the same thing. With this one, besides the subject, we would just want to have the artist listed, a dedication date. A lot of times, for more recently dedicated statues, you can actually find news articles or even videos that show it. Again, accessibility. The photograph here is the Carlton Fisk statue at Comiskey Park. You can only see it during a game when you're there, or if you're there on a tour. And again, documenting missing or damaged statues. The Bob Uecker one at, what is it called? American Family Field now. I must be in the front row, right? So if you want to go see this one, you have to go all the way to the top at the ballpark right behind home plate. And you can take your picture sitting in a chair with him. It's pretty fun to do. But then they put a cover over it after the game starts. So that's one of the things that you'd want to note, is that for this kind of statue, it's accessible during the game, but only up until game time. Murals and public art. If you take the red line to Comiskey Park, at the 35th Street station, there is this art glass by Paula Henderson. It was installed in 2015. If you can see in the middle panel, along the bottom is Jackie Robinson. He's sliding, and you see his arm above that partition there. You know, the artist explains in the dedication that that was simple, it's not symptomatic. What's the word I'm looking for? Symbolic of Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. So on his birthday today, that's one of the things that if you're getting off the train at 35th Street and you've never been to Chicago before, maybe you don't even notice this, or maybe you don't see it because you don't go by it, but it's something I would expect a baseball fan would want to see. Murals are one of the things that are probably the most temporary. This is a Rube Foster mural that was on this rolling shutter in front of a business in the Bronzeville area of Chicago. That's no longer there. At some point, somebody decided they just wanted to paint over it. I don't know why. But one of the reasons that this project is important is to document these things. And right outside the train station in Joliet, across from the independent team that's there, the Joliet Slammers, is a mural of Jesse Barfield that is in disrepair. So this is one where I didn't get a photograph of it anywhere near the time that it was in its best condition, but a hope is that maybe part of what we do can lead to publicizing restoration efforts for these kinds of things. And museums and exhibits, this is pretty straightforward. Here's a Louisville Slugger museum and factory. Everybody knows the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown and the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City, but there's all kinds of other museums. There's a baseball museum in Norway, Iowa, that was really a lot of fun to go to. There's a little baseball museum in Nokomis, Illinois, that focuses basically on Southern Illinois born players and is named after 3 players in particular, Bottomley, Ruffing, and Schulk. And there's these kind of museums all over the country. So one of the things we'd be wanting to do is just whatever the subject is, verify any seasonality or what the hours might be. And again, if an admission fee is charged or donations recommended, basically just a yes or no. It doesn't need to be up to date with how much it is and whether the museum is a tour by appointment or kind of a self-guided thing. There's also other museums. This is the Midway Museum in Rockford, Illinois. They have a permanent exhibit for the AAG PBL with a lot of really cool, authentic stuff from the Rockford Peaches and other documentation, player contracts and so forth from that league. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the IIWC has announced recently that they're building a museum that's going to be dedicated to the Women's Baseball League in Rockford at some point in the future. So that's pretty cool. This is like a walk of fame. This is outside the University of Milwaukee Panther Arena. And this has plaques. You could see Paul Molitor in the foreground there. But this features not only players from baseball, but all kinds of sports, but includes not only players from the Brewers, but also other players that were either born or lived in Milwaukee. So it's all kinds of fun to walk up and down, excuse me, and take a look at all the players that you can find there. But these are the kinds of things that with the project, we can map and kind of document who's there. Grave sites, this is one of the easy ones because they don't move for the most part, right? But basically the information we'd be looking for here is the cemetery, the section, the block, etc. A precise location if you can with GPS. The cemetery accessibility. Sometimes these cemeteries have hours and they have gates. Sometimes, especially in rural areas, there's really no gate and you can go in at any time you want. A lot of times you just want to do a transcription of the text. There may be other things there. Always make sure you look at the back of the tombstone and note if there's any other nearby graves. I happen to see Stu Thornley on the call today. I don't know him and he doesn't know me, but his Hall of Fame pinpointing the exact location of headstones has been phenomenal. And thank you, Stu, for doing that. But I'm hoping that we can eventually incorporate the Hall of Fame headstones and those of anybody else that people feel noteworthy enough to want to go visit. The grave sites, a lot of times, obviously, are very small and hard to find. So having those pinpoints will save you a lot of walking around and looking. As anybody that's maybe been to a cemetery knows, the headstones can be anything from, here's Ernie Banks, who would have been 91 years old today, showing a relief image of him playing baseball. In Blue Island, Illinois is Rube Foster, credited with starting the Negro Leagues. And you wouldn't even know he had anything to do with baseball, let alone even showing his entire name. So other homes and buildings that may have some significance. When Bill Perch and I went out to Cooperstown, we stopped in Martinsville, West Virginia. This is Hack Wilson's old house. And if you've ever seen that picture of him standing on a sidewalk in front of a house with a stack of Hack Wilson wagons, this is exactly where that picture was taken. So homes are a little bit different. There are childhood homes, adult homes. If it is worthwhile putting on the list, you want to list, who lived there, the years they lived there. If there's any kind of associated museum with it, if it's marked with a plaque. These ones I think get kind of touchy a little bit with regard to privacy issues. And I put neighborhood issues here because this was not the best neighborhood that Wilson's house was in. We took a quick couple of pictures and skedaddled. So one of the things that we'd want to keep in mind for listing any former players' homes would be whether we really want to do it and if there's concerns about privacy or safety in the area. In Illinois, here in Byron, is where Albert Spalding was born. This was a rock that used to be in front of his house, but they've moved it into the downtown area because the people that lived in that house were kind of getting sick of people stopping by and taking pictures. So one of the things that you want to keep in mind is to try and be as discreet as possible when you're doing those things. There's other buildings. If you've been to Orlando and you wanted to do something besides Disney World, There's a couple of baseball things to do in downtown, including Tinker Field, which is a lot of fun to go to. You could spend some time there. And then the Joe Tinker building. After he retired, he got into real estate. And the building where he had his offices is marked with this plaque. And you can see that it's not terribly accurate because along the way it says that Tinker helped the Cubs win the World Series in 1906, 07, 08, and 10. And you know that the Cubs did not win in 08 or 10, but it's actually pretty cool to see in person. Another one probably near and dear to Jacob's heart is the Black Sox Scandal Courthouse, located in Chicago here. It's a residential building now, but it's marked with a plaque that includes information on the fact that it was a courthouse at the time of those that time of that trial, and it's pretty cool to see. Say it ain't so, Joe. Yes or no? I don't know if that really happened, right? This is another one that's just a block north of Wrigley Field on Sheffield. Is the Hotel Carlos. You may know that the Chicago Cubs in their history have had 2 different players shot by women in hotel rooms. And this is the first of the 2 that happened was Billy Georges was shot by Violet Popovich in 1932 here. He survived and ended up being an all-star with the Cubs and otherwise, but just kind of a neat thing to go. If you're happening to walk by there, you go, well, that's where Billy was shot. Some miscellaneous things. Say, for instance, you're at Guaranteed Rate Park. I think I keep calling it Comiskey Park by habit. Along one of the ramps is this gigantic baseball and the photograph of Mark Burley in the background. It's just kind of a photo opportunity. You really can't see it in the picture, but if you wanted to, you could stand behind the baseball. It probably comes up waist high. But another thing that if you're at a ballpark, someone especially out of town might want to go check this out. At Lakefront Brewery in Milwaukee is the old beer mug that Bernie Brewer used to slide into at Milwaukee County Stadium when the Brewers would hit a home run. If you go on the tour there, not only do you get to try a couple of delicious beers, but the actual chalet that was at Milwaukee County Stadium is within the brewery, so you can actually see it. So it's these kinds of things that for a baseball fan, if you're thinking about trying to find somewhere else to go in an area, you might want to check these kinds of things out. Field of Dreams, I'm sure you guys have heard of this place, right? It was on my bucket list, somewhere I obviously wanted to go. I think I saw Dan Evans on the call, and I would expect he would attest to wanting everybody on the call to definitely get out there at some point. But it's, if you enjoy the movie, it's just a magical place to be. And obviously, I'd love to be able to see a major league game out there at some point too. A League of Their Own has a lot of places that they filmed in and around the Midwest. This is a place that we went this summer, Huntingburg League Stadium, which was the movie home of the Rockford Peaches, and out in the area where you come into the field is the Rockford Peaches bus that you could get onto and take a picture, so it's pretty cool. And just kind of talking about the initial scope of the project, I just kind of wanted to show you some examples. I'm sure all of you have done things like this, taken pictures at places like these. But most of what I was getting initially, even before getting into it, was how can I help? So what I've kind of done at this point is over the years, put together a spreadsheet that's got about 1,600 different data points on it. And embedded within that is, say, for instance, Wrigley Field is going to have several that are going to include individually listing the statues that are around Wrigley Field. For Comiskey, again, it'll individually show all the statues they have there, and both inside and outside the ballpark. So if you haven't already signed up for the group to get the emails and updates, you should go do that. And what we'll be doing is sending out a spreadsheet, a Google Sheet, so that people can volunteer to sign up and review and verify the established sites. So what we'd like to do is, depending on how many people we get, the more the better, kind of divvy up those sites and just go to Google Maps and verify that the information is still accurate, the address is there, The team name, the address, the GPS coordinates are all accurate and establish them. If you happen to be close enough to go visit the sites in person to photograph and document and provide those GPS coordinates, that's even better. That's awesome. And the sheet will also have an opportunity to claim a territory that you will volunteer to periodically verify for accuracy. Again, mostly by Google Maps. And I'm kind of thinking what we'll need to do, especially for the teams and team movement and team name changes and so forth, is to have some kind of annual process where we verify those things and so forth. Other things like grave sites, I would expect we probably don't need to verify terribly often, if at all. So otherwise, once you get that territory, assuming you're going to pick somewhere that's nearby your house, if you have new sites that aren't on there, and I would expect there's going to be hundreds, maybe even thousands of new sites that we'll need to list, share and document those sites, and we'll put them on the list and get them to that map eventually. And like I said, just have some adventurous baseball related fun. I mean, if you're in an area where there's not snow on the ground right now and you can get out and do these things, that's awesome. A little snow didn't stop me from going grave hunting this past week. So if there's always an opportunity, I think, to do these things if you have these things near you. So this is basically what the Google Sheet looks like. You can see along the top there, we've got type. So you're basically just going to put in what kind of thing it is. There may be some overlap, and it's not real important that it's completely 100% accurate, but statue, grave site, a museum, a historic ballpark. You can see Cy Young Lanes as more of a photo opportunity. So I just put bowling alley there. And actually, I think I spelled it wrong at bowling alley. But these are just the kind of things that we're looking for. If it's an active ballpark, list the name. If there are names associated with each person that might be on a mural, we should list them individually. So there's a mural in Pittsburgh under an overpass that's got legends from Pittsburgh baseball that I think there's probably 15 or 20 people on there. So we've listed each of them individually. So for instance, you're a Josh Gibson guy and you want to see all the Josh Gibson stuff in Pittsburgh, you're able to look at our list and go, okay, I'm going to check these ones off. Address, city, state, zip, that's all pretty straightforward. Phone numbers, obviously a lot of these are not going to have phone numbers, but if there is one listed, if they have a website listed, and then the most important thing is that lat long. And this will be information you can get from Google Maps. And I put together a tutorial if you're not familiar with how to get that information from Google Maps. But this is where we'll get the information we need to pinpoint each of these places on the map itself when we get to that point. That'll be at some point in phase 2. At the chapter level, I'm hoping that the next time you guys have a meeting, or if you get together for a lunch or a dinner or something else, you can engage your members to help with verification. So if you take a list, maybe you can help split it up between some people in your group too, to take a little bit of the load off of you. And if these places are close, verify the information, get the photos if you can, encourage or maybe coordinate visits as a chapter outing to go to the sites. I think this will be fun for Chicago chapter to do, but we'll kind of put together maybe a top 10 list of things in our area that we would recommend to baseball fans coming into the Chicago area. And also Chris and Mark and I will make ourselves available if you wanted to consider inviting us to a future chapter meeting via Zoom for just a brief presentation to answer questions and maybe show off a couple of the things that we know about what's around the area where you guys are. For the Google Map verification, hopefully you're familiar with Google Maps to a certain extent. Everybody that volunteers will just get a list. Depending on how much or how many volunteers we have, we can divvy it up as hopefully it's as small as possible. Just go through, verify the accurate information is listed, including those coordinates. Document the requested information for additional sites that aren't listed. And then you just advise us when the reviews have been completed. Hopefully, if we can get this taken care of in this next week, we can have maybe in the next 30 days, everybody get their list back to us with the information having been verified. If you are unfamiliar with it and how to find the GPS coordinates, we put together a little tutorial. I'll send it to everybody who volunteers to help with the sites. And also, if you are submitting new sites that haven't already been placed on the list, we'll need you to verify those GPS coordinates for those so that we can put them right into the master spreadsheet. The volunteer sign up, that'll go out. You'll see it's got by state and region. I've heard from some people that have already wanted to claim regions, so I don't have them on here yet. I would hope that if you're on this call, you'll go in and do it right away. Also thought that maybe it'd be a good idea to have people volunteer, not by geographic area, but by league, to volunteer each year, just to verify that the names of the teams and the locations of the ballparks and so forth are accurate for each of the leagues listed here. At the bottom there, there's also information about adding additional leagues. So if, say, for instance, there's a wood bat league near you that you would like to volunteer for, more power to you, take it, put your information down there, and then you can claim that league. And then also with regard to the teams, I thought it would be important maybe, and I've listed the Major League ballparks here now, but if you have a pet project or a ballpark near you at any level that you want to claim and be able to update with the information and verify the information, because you know a lot about it, then we want that. So if you want to claim a Major League ballpark here, or then down below on the sheet when you see it, again, will be the information about adding additional teams and ballparks. So that's really about it. If you haven't followed us on Twitter yet, we've got a Twitter at SABR Landmarks. Basically, that's the presentation. So if you have any questions, like I said, a lot of folks have reached out to me already, and I've appreciated it. I hope I've answered all your questions so far. And if you have any more questions at this point, I think I'll get back to the screen here. We can see if there's any questions in the chat and kind of go from there. Okay, let's see. We've got a lot of. Okay, so the first question is, or comment is from Bruce Adams. Share your email address so we can send you stuff. I will do that. I'll send one out through the SABR list, so make sure you're on the list. Vince Guerrieri, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Vince. Jimmy Fox Park in Lakewood has connection to Double X. He played there, lived there for a while after his sport or his playing days. Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, like I said, Bill and I went there and had to kind of climb over some construction fences to get in, but we were able to do it. Stu Thornley says, Hotel Carlos, exactly the kind of place I visit, great stuff. Bruce McClure, my wife's sitting next to me, cataloging things in New Hampshire we could list. That's awesome. Benjamin Weiner, Bruce, I was thinking of sites in New Hampshire too. He's down in Rhode Island. David Burkett, if anyone's curious, during the pandemic, I've been running a Facebook group called Out of the Park, Baseball's Historical Places. There's a few hundred sites listed in one type of post or another. That sounds great, David. Ryan Woodward, group's a lot of fun. Check it out every day. Bruce McClure, happy to get started in New Hampshire. If Vermont needs one of us, he's all over it. That's awesome. Dan Evans, I'd love any fellow SABR members to come to Field of Dreams and say hi when you're there. James McCallowitz, visited Field of Dreams in early days or able to play a pickup game there. Awful lot of fun. Thanks for the information here. Chapter ownership or regions, best way to divvy up the work. I think basically whoever wants to volunteer at this point to take a list can kind of own it. And if you can get other people to help you, I think that's great. I would hope that that would work. Scott Good, the Fort Worth or Fred Worth from Arkansas SABR chapter photographed verified locations of more than 9,000 major league players. It'd be a great resource for Greystone's project. That's awesome. Can murals be labeled at risk or not at risk? That's an interesting topic. Possibly. I mean, there's probably some way to indicate whether we think that it's a permanent or maybe a temporary one for sure. Ralph Carhart, can a photo repository be created to keep pictures in between phase 1 and phase 2? That's something we need to discuss, is how to get photos to us and how we're gonna keep them. Obviously, that's the plan.
The Google Maps thing, once we get the sites actually, because the Google Maps is phase 2, right? Phase 1 is filling out that Google Doc, and then phase 2 is transferring that information into the map, right?
Correct.
So once we get to the maps, we can put photos in the map locations and create a whole slideshow within that. But I'm just curious if there's a way we can figure out to keep the photos in a place so that when we're ready to get to that point, they're just there. And then we're not trying to have to go back, and people can, as they go and visit places, immediately dump their photos into a folder somewhere.
Yeah, that's a good question that we really hadn't thought about quite yet. So we will talk about that and figure out from a technology standpoint how best to do that. Kurt, is it Blumenau? Handicapped accessibility, probably a good thing to include as well. For sure. For instance, when we were in Pittsburgh, if you wanted to visit the Josh Gibson grave marker, you had to climb up a really steep hill to get there. So it would be really difficult for someone with mobility issues to get there. So that's a great idea. Jason Schwartz, Field of Dreams 2. If you build it, SABR Landmarks will document it. So we'll definitely put that on there. Ryan Woodward, great project. I've been gathering this kind of information for the IWBC on sites honoring women. Already have a lot on women I could share. After you do anything in the Pittsburgh area, perfect.
Question. If we wish to add something to the list, is that something that needs to go through approval to you and the other co-chairs, or is that something that's just simply added to the Excel sheet?
Yeah, it'll come to us and then we'll have access to the master list. And then one of us will add it, assuming that it meets all the requirements and all the information that we needed has been provided.
Could you hit the road, please? Could you hit the road? Hit the road. My cat's obscuring my view right now. My wife is quickly cataloging here, going through Wikipedia and whatnot, players from my neck of the woods in New Hampshire that were born and or passed away here. Now, are we worried? I guess we're not going to be terribly concerned with those who are born here, because unless we can find their childhood home. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, if what you're able to compile is information on where grave sites are, that's great, and we'll put those on the list.
So then I need to connect with Mike Richards, who's got several New Hampshire graves for me already.
Yeah, and Mike actually sent to us a list of everything that he's put together. So we'll be referencing that with the list that we have. And then anything that you have that's new, Bruce, then we'll be able to add after.
Yeah, he and I are going to connect as well.
I will do that, yes.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Excellent. All right, I think that kind of gets us down to the questions in the chat. Anybody else want to pop in with questions or comments?
John,
So,
this is
where
Stu.
can we find this Google Doc?
For the list of places?
Yeah.
When we get all of the people that have kind of volunteered to verify it, we'll divvy it up and then we'll send you a portion of it. Then once we get all that stuff put together, then we'll be able to publish the final list then.
So for now, you want us to just email you with what we're interested in covering?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I'm hoping, like, say for instance, somebody like Bruce takes Vermont or New Hampshire, maybe there's also going to be a lot of places in Wyoming or Montana that maybe no one's claimed, that other people will kind of help fill in the gaps there.
John, this is Stu. I perked up when you showed Hotel Carlos because the scene where Billy Jergus got shot is exactly the kind of thing I would go see because I'm kind of morbid. But, you know, when you talk about is there a plaque, is there anything really to market? You know, I've done things like gone to the intersection where Lyman Bostock was shot. Stuff like that, is that worthy of, I mean, you can go see it, you can kind of imagine the scene there, but is that kind of stuff just a place where something notable happened worthy of this?
Yeah, I think what we discussed was we would kind of err on the side of inclusion. And then basically what we'll do is just send the information to us. And assuming we think that it might be interesting, I'd like to go see that. It was in somewhere in Indiana, wasn't it, if I'm not mistaken?
Gary,
Gary. So I maybe if I'm driving through Gary on the way to the Railcats game, I'll stop by. And
Yeah,
see.
it's just to the west. And, you know, I want to say something here since Bruce Adams is on this, and he and his wife's book, kind of landmarks or things to see. Were the first time I actually had an address for the Polo Grounds plaque, and I went there in 1997. I mean, I know where it was, but it's nice to have an address that got me going so much on the Polo Grounds. And Bruce, I don't know if you got to Cuba and saw this, but with Peggy on our first Cuba Ball tour, and Ralph Carthart has been on there. Ralph, do you remember the name of that stadium that had the plaque where there was an all-star game with all these major leaguers? So,
It was the Tropicana, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wasn't it the orange? Yeah, it was the Tropicana because the
and
orange.
Peggy
company
was the
had it.
one who wrote down all the names, so I'll dig through my notes on that.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, Bruce and his wife on this. As you were talking, John, I'm scribbling all sorts of stuff down that's popping into my head. This is great.
Good, awesome.
Thank you, Stu. I'm sending John a note to get his snail mail address so I can send him our book.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Awesome.
Thank you. It's old, it's out of date, but anytime we saw anything historic, we wrote about it.
And it's still on my shelf, even if it's out of date.
If anyone's
you.
specifically interested in doing grave hunting, both Bill Lee and Bob Bailey have books with the locations of grave sites that you could go and, you know, confirm the status of things and get pictures.
Okay.
I
So,
will
John,
add as someone who's been part of these efforts before, that I do think we also want to err on the side of, you know, there is something to see rather than something necessarily happened here, but there's nothing of significance that's, you know, part of that. So if a home's been torn down, if it's just a street corner, but there's nothing actually there, no plaque, let alone an actual ballpark or anything. I do think we want to, you know, just in the interest of prioritizing our limited time and resources, make sure to err on that side of things rather than, you know, here's a street corner where something happened 50 years ago that doesn't look anything like it does today. I too have dragged family members to many of those places myself, but I think it's much more interesting to go to places where there's a plaque, or there's an actual ballpark, or there's something to see. So I think, you know, just in terms of making sure that all of us are using our time wisely, I would caution against adding 1,000 places where there's not really much there. So I think we should try to prioritize that if at all possible, and then, you know, possibly make a list of other places of significance where there's not much there, and just let people know that.
Right. Yeah, I think phase one is basically just updating the list with any information that may include plaques, statues, historic ballparks, things like that, where it is standing. And then eventually we have some aspirations of making it that much more complete.
And I would just add that the one exception to what Jacob's talking about, and I can't think of anything that would qualify, would be if something didn't have a plaque, but we as a group use that information to actually put up a plaque.
Yeah.
Because it rose to that level of significance. I mean, that would be the case if, for example, that no one knew where Ebbets Field was. I mean, I realize everyone knows where Ebbets Field was, but if it was something sort of important enough, I don't know whether Stu wants to do that for Bostock or not, but I can't think of an example, but I can certainly see that it would be great if one of the things that comes out of this project down the road. I mean, right now we're doing the building blocks, which is absolutely the right thing to start with. But down the road, if one of the things that we get out of this is being able to mark some of these landmarks better than we currently do.
Well, and I would add to that. I mean, SABR chapters and committees have, marked quite a few historic ballparks. That's actually a fairly obvious category where there aren't a whole lot of historic markers that we could absolutely fundraise. We've got a local grants program now. So, I mean, that's something we could fundraise and start to mark more of these Major League, Negro League parks, All-American Girls parks, things like that, of historical significance that currently don't have anything. But I would focus efforts on that more than a street corner in Gary, Indiana, but that's just me.
Right. No, I think you're right. And I think that my sense of SABR in the last 20 years is that there's always a lot of enthusiasm putting out markers, especially markers like that. I saw somebody in the chat mention there was nothing for Hinchcliffe. That's Donna. And that is a perfect example that I think that money and energy could be found to do such a thing.
Yeah, agreed.
As we talk about claiming territories and tasks, I'm kind of interested in down the road how someone like maybe 6 months from now gets in, or maybe someone spins up their chapter as a chapter project that wants to do this. How will they be able to find out, what things in their area are claimed or unclaimed and who is associated with that? What possibilities do we have for future collaboration with someone that's already working on something?
Yeah, well, I would hope once we do the Google Sheet where people will go on and claim whatever areas or teams or leagues or whatever that they'd like to, that we can periodically communicate with chapter leadership across the country and just remind them, hey, we are in need of somebody to cover this area, or there seems to be a pretty big California, for instance, there's a lot of stuff in California and it's a giant state geographically, that maybe we need to kind of split things up in terms of Northern or Central or Southern California, things like that. But we can continue to communicate with chapter leadership, or maybe Jacob can put it in the This Week in SABR occasionally too. Hey, we need some help with this area, or just remind people that it's out there.
I guess specifically, I'm wondering, will I be able to look at this Google Sheet and see what is claimed or who is working on things in my area or an area that I'm interested in?
Yeah, I mean, my plan is after the meeting today is to send an email to everybody that's on the call today and that's in the group with that sheet, so you can see it. And I don't claim to be the world's foremost authority on how Google Sheets works, but my understanding is that everybody is able to access it and can see what people are doing in kind of real time. So you should be able to see what's claimed, what's not claimed, and so forth.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah.
Along that same line, is it possible to see the sheet that you showed earlier of Ohio with, where the markers and such are, so we can offer up things that aren't on the list? Like I saw something on the Ohio list that I had been to that wasn't on your sheet, but I don't want to send in like 1,000 things and you have 999 already, right?
Yeah.
So is there a way to see what's already on the list so we can help add, but not add too much by giving repeat information they already have?
Yeah, see, I think what we'll do originally is just divvy it up so that each person will take X number of sites and verify it. We'll compile all that stuff back together, and then we'll be able to send it out to everybody after that point. So I don't want everybody that's all of a sudden 14 people are saying, hey, you missed something. We want to kind of centralize it with one person. And then once we get that list to a point where we think that it's verified and ready to be published, then we could send it out to everybody and you could add things then.
John,
I
I
have
was
some
just
feedback on the technical end specifically.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Sure. So I think I just threw this from part of it in the chat. So I think the really critical thing to remember here with the first phase, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that this is essentially the construction of a data set that will serve as the basis for a future website, ultimately. So for that to work, we have to, I think, be really careful about how we standardize different data elements. So like, because I've dealt with bad data entry with my job at work, it's a nightmare. So consequently, for each of the different landmark types, we might want to split them up into classes, formalize the data required, maybe make them optional and whatnot, and then build out like a Google form. I've seen that done before. So that restricts people from entering things erroneously into a spreadsheet and keeps the data nice and clean in such a manner that we can use later on.
Yeah.
Similarly, you mentioned the Google Maps feature or the validation of Google Maps for latitude and longitude. It's possible to write a script actually that will automatically get that data from Google. So if we just have an address, you can basically write something out of Python or R that would just pull the information automatically. The validation component then just becomes, think about it, just looking at Google Maps and making sure that the address is correctly listed on that platform. So those are just a couple of ideas that I have. Oh yeah, and the third would be as far as territories are concerned, you can do the same thing. You can plot you can make a quick and dirty plot if you just have a list of members' towns that they live in, and then just kind of draw lines, see who's tightly concentrated where.
Okay, if it works, Mike, maybe I can give you a call at some point and we could talk about this a little bit more. I don't have any of that technical knowledge. If
Sure.
there's a way to scrape data without having to verify it manually, obviously that's preferable. I just know that for a lot of these things, for instance, with Wrigley Field, when you zoom in on a Google map, it's going to show you a pinpoint for the Ron Santos statue, where the Ernie Banks statue is, where the Harry Carey statue is. And I don't know if that's going to be as precise with just an address. So those are the kinds of things that we want to do. So, but I will certainly lean on you for your technical knowledge because you.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to help.
Appreciate it.
So I also have a question, maybe for Mike and Jacob and maybe John. One concern I have is that at the moment, John has 1,600 or so odd records in this Excel sheet. And over time, we're going to have hopefully much more than that. Let's say we have 3,000 or 4,000. I do have a concern with making this raw data accessible to the public, because there is potentially, there's nothing really stopping somebody in this call from, I'm not accusing anyone, from using this data and making some commercial application and sort of rendering moot this committee. So I guess I want someone to talk me into the fact that we should let everyone see all of the data.
I don't think we need to personally. I think that maybe they can see the pieces that they enter. That's an option. I don't know if it is through like through something public like the Google system, but otherwise, I think that should be sent. I think data sets should always be centrally controlled, just in general. Especially
Yeah, and one thing with the Google Sheets and Google Maps is that we can control which fields are visible and which are not. We don't necessarily have to have the entire data set publicly available or the underlying Google Sheets data set publicly available. We can absolutely make only the title, description, address available, something like that. Whatever we want to do, we can choose bits and pieces of it.
Yeah, and from my perspective too, I think a lot of the fun for me with this in Google Maps was finding places and then looking at it on Google Maps and then going down to the street level and actually locating the exact precise location of whatever it is I was looking for. And I think a lot of the time that I spent on it, probably hundreds of hours at this point or more, is the latitude, longitude that you can use to populate a map easily. So that's the part that I would feel most serious about protecting and not necessarily giving to everybody, is that information. But I would think that everything else, I don't know, but maybe that's a question that, Mike and I can talk about in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually not too worried about putting this stuff out there, because the reality is most of the information is already publicly available. Nobody's ever really put it together. And I mean, there have been a couple efforts made, but they always fall apart because they tend to add too many sites that aren't significant, or they tend to add things like restaurants or whatever that close down, and all of a sudden the data set is extremely out of date. And SABR is guilty of those efforts in the past as well. So yeah, I'm not actually worried about outside forces trying to come in and steal it, because the reality is the Ernie Banks statue at Wrigley Field can be found. You don't need SABR for that. So we can what our value is here is putting it all together and giving people kind of the collective knowledge that we have, and making it available in one place, I think. So
Right.
I think to Mark's point, that's exactly where it becomes valuable to somebody else. We've done all the work
yeah,
by putting it all together, and boom, here we go. I'm now gonna build an app, publish a book, something using all of our work.
I'm not a lawyer, so I can't actually speak to this, but I do know, for example, that the Negro Leagues information that Elias is incorporating into their record books, they had to actually purchase that information from the website where they got it from. So if it comes to a point where someone does replicate our efforts and turn it into something that they can monetize, I think a conversation could be had, and we would have a legal claim. But I also don't know. I think this group of people are the only ones nutty enough to do something like this. So I don't know if there's going to be a long line for it, my 2 cents.
the suspects are inside the Zoom room right now. Yes.
John, I got a question for you, I guess kind of related to where this conversation's going, but the final vision, like when you get all the sites, everything's validated, maybe you've got some little gadget where somebody, can plan their road trip or whatever. At the end of the day, is that going to be available to the public or just to SABR members, or where does this thing land at the very end?
I don't know. I mean, Mark and I talked about this a little bit in terms of who it's going to be made available to. It's a conversation to be had somewhere down the road. It's certainly a nice perk of being in SABR to have access to this. Also, using it for the general public could be a way to encourage people to find SABR and join, thinking that, oh, there are other people out there that want to do this. So that's something we've actually talked about and really haven't made a decision yet. I think a lot of it is going to depend on what the final mapping ability looks like, and we're still kind of talking about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually the part of that phase of the project is the part that we do need some help from the technical end as far as how to make this all work, from the mapping component. So we're not there yet, but we'll get there at some point.
Yeah.
Hey, John.
Go ahead.
Oh, Mark, I'll make this really short. This is David Burkett. I am an attorney, so I'll throw in my 2 cents. I think the risk is real that if it's a concern, if there's an interest in keeping this information proprietary, once the facts are published, somewhere publicly, it would be very difficult to keep somebody from monetizing it. Anything that we wrote, like a summary of like, hey, here's an explanation of what this site is, or something like that, that would be protectable. But just like the location of stuff, there's not really any avenue to do that. Facts are not protectable by intellectual property law as a general principle. Maybe we could just discuss some exceptions, but there aren't many. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's valuable to know. Thank you, David. I think SABR's got some other data sets that are somewhat proprietary, and we have on occasion been able to sell those to other people that are looking to do something with, including Baseball Reference. And statistics kind of fall in the same category as statistics are out there, but the people who do the work, that is occasionally proprietary information, but the reality is, yeah, the statues, the grave sites, all these things, the information is factual, it's out there. So not much we can do to kind of stop against that. But the reality is, I mean, people have sold, tried to publish these books on grave sites or, travel attractions in baseball, and, they're not making any more money than the rest of us on baseball books. So I'm not terribly worried about that.
Yeah, that nobody got really rich on those books, but
That's what I'm saying.
yeah, I own copies of all of them. But
Exactly. The books are out there. It doesn't mean anybody's making money off it. And SABR's not looking to make money off this project either. But yeah, I mean, it's possible somebody could, swipe the whole data set and do something with it. But, I think the only people that are, dedicated enough to do that are probably around here. So.
yeah, fair enough and good point.
I'm a lawyer too. I don't practice in intellectual property at all. So my concern is not necessarily the enforcement of some kind of property right for it. It's just knowing that it's accessible, because once somebody takes it, what do you do then? I mean, you're not going to be able to sue them. You're not going to be able to get it back. So that's what I'm more worried about, is protecting it to prevent it from happening.
Yeah, I guess the model that would argue against my concern, which is a model that I always go back to, is Retrosheet. What Retrosheet did is they said, okay, everything is free and everybody can do whatever the hell they want with it, and God love you all. And it's been very good for Retrosheet. It hasn't been good for them in terms of making them rich. No one's ever made a cent from all of the volunteer hours that they've done. But Baseball Reference is a thriving company that uses their free data, and other companies have done the same thing. So I don't think there's necessarily a model, but I think of what John is referring to as phase one of this project, which is creating essentially the base of operations for this whole effort. Just creating the data is sort of the least, the comparison I would make to Retrosheet, it's sort of the least glamorous part of everything, is just creating the spreadsheet. It is absolutely 100% necessary. It needs to be accurate. It needs to not go out of date. There needs to be people that are willing to go and schlep themselves over to some statue to make sure it's still there because it wasn't documented for the last 5 years. I mean, all that stuff is completely required to make this work. And then there's all this fun stuff that can happen with the data, which is writing a book about the best sites in Iowa. And every local chapter could, make use of this on their website. I mean, there's just dozens of things you can imagine. I could see SABR doing a picture book, because the biggest problem we have with books in SABR, or one of the biggest, is photographs. Well, if we take all the photographs ourselves, we can do something that no one's really ever done before. So there's a lot of great things we can do if we get phase one right, which is why John wants to start with phase one.
Yeah, and I see some comments, fun events, chapter road trips. I think there's nothing more fun than actually seeing in person with my own eyes a place that I've dreamt about seeing or have only seen on Google Maps. I think the phase one hopefully won't be as brutal as maybe it seems initially, because really all you're going to be doing is you'll click on the lat and long, you put it right into the Google Maps, it'll take you to a spot. If it looks accurate, you're good to go, and maybe you'll see something or you haven't seen before, or you'll get to do a little bit of traveling without leaving your computer. So
yeah, now John's done the hard work. Having the data set has always been the part of the projects that has tripped this up in the past. So John's done the hard work. We've got a pretty good data set to start with. Now it's a matter of just making sure that things that are there are accurate and up to date and stuff. My Atlanta Braves have changed ballparks quite a few times in the last 20 or 30 years. So.
Does anyone know how, does anyone have the Google Maps experience to know how to merge already created Google Maps? Because I've already created one for all of the Hall of Famer grave sites, right down to the specific GPS coordinates. But that was a time-consuming operation to make happen. Is there some way that we can just merge that with this? Can old already created Google Maps be merged with a new one? And I will say this, that Google Maps do have a site limit. I think you can only have like 500 locations or something, and then it craps out and you can't have any more on a specific map.
Yeah,
So-
I think it's
Google Maps-
2000 is what we
Is it? Is
discovered
that what
last
it is?
time. So
Okay.
yeah, we definitely need to prioritize. We can't just put in 10,000 player grave sites and have it on Google. So
Yeah, Google Maps is problematic too because the information is just available with a right click. Somebody's able to take all the information and it's not protected in any way. So the information that you used to populate the Google Maps, Ralph, was it from a spreadsheet, an Excel sheet, or a Google sheet?
It didn't play out like that, which is weird because I'm an Excel guy. Like everything in my life is in an Excel spreadsheet. But for weird reasons that I won't get into, that project actually was not. So I don't have that as a usable data set at the moment.
Yeah, then I wouldn't know.
So, hey, John, have you had any interaction with the Ballparks Committee?
Not with regard to this yet, no.
Okay.
But I kind of thought like for Major League Ballparks that have a bio or whatever, we could link right to it and then you get all the information you need about it.
Like, I don't know. I mean, the Ballparks Committee sort of is comes and goes in terms of its activity level. The Ballparks Committee goes back decades, 30 years, more than 30 years, and sometimes it's dormant for a while. So I don't know, A, whether they'd be interested in helping, B, whether there are people within that committee that have already done some of this stuff. Do you know anything about this, Jacob?
Some of the Ballparks people like Kevin Johnson in Oklahoma are involved in the Seamheads Ballparks database as well. So I know they've got some type of underlying database for that, but I don't know that the SABR committee has ever really done anything with it. So I think the only place it's visible is on Seamheads right now. But there clearly is a database of some sort with historic Major League parks at all levels. So and part of the problem with merging anyone else's existing list is that we need to make sure that the metadata is, the same for everything. So, and that's actually been a challenge in the past is, everybody's like, oh, well, I built this sheet, I built this, I've got this list, I've got this map, but the reality is the hard work is making sure they're all compatible. We can't just, it takes quite a bit of work to merge anyone's existing sheets into what we've already got built. So we want to keep it the same, keep all the fields the same so that, we're all working on the same data sheet.
Right.
And eventually once we clean this stuff up, we might be able to create a new a Google form for new submissions that will have the fields that we're currently using. So we just, need to make sure that that's all consistent everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, what I'll do is once we wrap this up, I'll send an email through the SABR website that'll have my email address if you want to contact me directly. And it'll also have the link to that Google sheet where you could sign up on that sheet for whatever territories, ballparks, and so forth that you want to. I have seen in the chat people claiming stuff, and I've got emails where people have claimed stuff, but if you could put it right on that sheet, that would be the easiest thing to do. Make sure you got the things that you wanted.
Hey, John, I have a feeling you're going to get inundated with a lot of emails on your personal email address. Wouldn't it be wise to create a committee email address, a simple Gmail?
Maybe.
That all the co-chairs could then access?
Yeah, I'm kind of learning on the fly here, so that works. That's a good idea.
I have a question regarding Google Maps. Excuse me. If we're using Google Maps to catalog a lot of these sites, do we think that we want to divvy it up based on the limitations? So what is it? You can have 5,000 entries on one Google map. Is that correct?
500, I think.
Yeah, you don't need to worry about that. I'm thinking if we have hopefully 20 people volunteer, we divide up 160 by 20. It's less than 100 sites.
Oh, no, what I'm saying is, pardon me, I'm sorry. So you have one Google map for one subject, say ballparks. Then you have another Google map for grave sites. Am I making any sense?
Oh, I got you. The final product is not going to be a Google map.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we have not made any decisions on
Yeah.
how this is gonna, we need to know what we're working with first, and how
Oh,
many.
we're taking, okay.
Or we
Yeah.
can, because Google Maps does have limits. And so if we've exceeded those limits, Google Maps will not be an option for us. So we're
Right.
going to have to figure out what we've got first and then how we're going to display it and make it available.
Okay.
Ideally, what we'll have is some way to say, you can filter out, hey, I don't want to go to minor league ballparks on my road trip. So I take that off the list and then it cancels all those ones out. I know that there's the ability to do that with mapping programs.
Okay.
Does it make sense for us to start with more of a oddities or rare things people know of versus, hey, I know where Wrigley Field's at. It's on this map that SABR put together. Those are typically things that people know of or where they're at. But as far as where Lyman Bostock got shot, that may be relevant to some people, but not everybody. But it would be more, I don't know, more history to it. Or, you know, I thought here in Fort Wayne, we've got Bill Wamsgans. There's a gym here in town that's named after him. So I would put that on the list. You know, a restaurant that Jim Rivera owned here in town, those types of things versus, you know, the obvious ones. At
Yeah,
least
I
to
think-
start, maybe.
I mean, Tim, what we're starting with is the list I've already put together, which already includes all the major league stuff and the AAA or whatever it's called now, all that stuff. So if there are things that need to be added to the list, that's what we'll be kind of doing as we move towards phase 2. Phase 1 is just verifying what we have already. And if there are historical markers or ballparks or something that's not on there, we'll add those. But the oddities, I think I would like to add, but we'll have to do that some point down the road.
This is great, John.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Thanks for everybody for participating. I think we're running almost an hour and 20 minutes here. So unless there's anything else, we can wrap up. And like I said, I'll send the email out that has information to contact me directly and that sign up sheet, and then just go to it, claim your territory, claim your ballparks, and we'll just kind of go from there.
John,
Great
if I
stuff.
could,
Over to it.
John, if I could, I was not here for most of the meeting. Scott
Sure.
Good, it's showing me as being Scott Good. That's because he sent me his link to join the meeting. My name is Fred Worth. Some of you know me. Because Scott mentioned that you were looking at graves as being one thing that is of interest. And if you count major leaguers, umpires, and a bunch of others, I've been to over 9,000 of them. And I've got photos of all of those and GPS coordinates of all of those.
That's pretty impressive. So yeah, I mean, that's really one of the things that's pretty lacking on the sheet that I've compiled to this point is I have some grave sites, but not too many. So whatever you're willing to share with us, we can look at it and figure out a way to put it on the list. But I know it took you a lot of time to do that. And I would hope you're willing to share wherever you have, that'd be great.
There are two that I would not share because I was sworn to secrecy in order to get the information. I'll give you one example. I have a picture of Ken Caminiti's grave provided to me by Craig Biggio under the condition that I never publish it.
Wow, okay. That's
And
on
I've got-
it's on his ranch, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay, I've heard that.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Jacob, I have a quick question for you.
Mhm.
I see this is being recorded. Is it going to be on YouTube?
Yes, we'll post it on YouTube and then I'll send it to John and we'll send it out to the committee, people who've signed up for the committee emails as well, so they can watch his presentation over again and, you know, see the chit chat at the end here. So.
And I want to reiterate John's suggestion that people who haven't taken this step yet get on Twitter and follow this account. I think that's where maybe with where a lot of the photo sharing is going to happen. So it could be, I think it could be kind of a fun community.
Gonna need a hashtag.
We've already had a mystery solved by Detective Jason Schwartz. Last week, I went out to see a statue of Jim Bottomley in Oglesby, Illinois. And when I got there, it was not there. And through some super sleuth thing, Jason was able to figure out that they pulled it in during the winter months and then put it back out once it's nice out again. So those are the fun kind of things you'll see on Twitter. And hopefully, if you guys, especially when it gets nicer out and you're going out to visit stuff, we'll be able to retweet things and show what's cool around your neck of the woods.
John, the Cubs just took down all their statues today for
Just
cleaning.
2 of them, just 2 of them.
Oh, just 2? Okay.
Yeah, they took down the ones on the corner where they're putting up that sports book. So that's
Oh, yeah.
exciting.
Okay.
They probably have to take down all the names of the people in the union.
Yeah.
Not the ex-players, though.
All right, thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. It was a nice turnout.
Thanks, John. Great
If you have
stuff.
other
Great stuff, man.
questions, let me know. We'll try and get this as streamlined as possible. And once you get your data set, you can look at it. If you have more questions, let me know, but it should hopefully be relatively self-explanatory. I'll also send a link to that, or a copy of the tutorial, just in case you're unfamiliar with getting GPS stuff from Google Maps, and we'll just kind of go from there. So appreciate your time tonight and looking forward to getting this exciting project underway.
Thank you, John.
Everybody.
All right.
Thank you, John.
Take
Thanks,
it easy,
John.
everybody.
Thanks a lot. This was great.
Good to see ya.
Good night.
Thanks.